Hello everybody, I'm Nick, and in this video I'm going to introduce you to a brand new exception added in dotnet 7 that is never actually supposed to be thrown. It's a pretty interesting use case that Microsoft themselves had, and I wanted to take that opportunity to show you how you can use it in your code. If you like that type of content and you want to see more, make sure you subscribe, ring the notification bell, and for more training, check out nickchapsas.com. But before I move on, I want to let you know that I'm running a massive Black Friday discount at nickchapsas.com, which is where I'm hosting my full-length courses. Until the 28th of November, you can use discount code BF2022 to get 25% off any of the individual courses or 15% off the already discounted bundles. I always cover real world scenarios and best practices in my courses from things I've seen working on these high scale systems myself. So if you want to do what thousands of you have already done, check the link in the description. All right, so let me show you what I have here. So I have a simple console application. That's what I'm going to use to showcase the new feature. And I'm going to start by adding a new enum over here. So I'm going to say premium status enum, and I'm going to have a few things. For example, normal, so you don't really have a premium status, then gold, and then let's say platinum. Let's just keep it with 3. And what I want to do is have a mechanism to return a friendly name that I can actually visualize for my enum. So for example, I can say status name equals, and I can have a get status method. And the reason why I do that is because I don't want the compiler to mess with my examples. So over here, I'm going to say premium status, get status. I'm going to return something that the compiler doesn't know about above. So let's just move this over here and then say that this is actually the status, and then var status name. And if I use one of the modern features of C#, the switch expression, I can do the following. I can say status switch, and I can switch on the status. And then I can say things like normal returns normal status, and then do the same for the other two. So gold status and platinum status both get their own friendly text. And then in the end, I'm just going to say write line and print it in the console. So status name, and that's it. And if I go ahead and I run this, in this case, we had normal, so we're returning normal status. Straightforward. However, as you can see here, I have a warning, and the warning is add default arm. And why am I asked to do this? Many of you might not know this, but in here, I can actually go ahead and remove this return normal and say return premium status of, let's say, 5. So you can have an integer converted into an enum based on its index in the enum ordering itself. So if I do that now, the compiler doesn't really care about anything. It finds that this is absolutely fine, even though technically it knows that this doesn't have a 5 in it. And if I go ahead and I run this now, I'm getting an exception. And the exception is, in this case, switch expression exception, non-exhaustive switch expression failed to match each input. Because I tried to say that this is 5, but it doesn't really have a 5, so it doesn't know how to handle it. And this is why writer here tells me that you should actually have a default arm and handle that scenario in a graceful manner. Now, this is the default implementation that it actually adds, and it has a hint over here where I can go and initialize the members as well if I want to give it more meaning. But the exception that tells me to throw is an argument out of range exception, which technically it's true, but it's a bit of a weird exception because ultimately this should never really be thrown. I shouldn't have a scenario where I'm trying to pass an enum and that is passed incorrectly and an exception is thrown. And this, by the way, is just one of the use cases. It's not the only use case. Let me show you another example. Before I show you the solution, I'm going to go ahead and create a new class called task extension, so taskx. And I'm going to paste the following method. Now, you might have seen this method floating around. The purpose of this method is to effectively await multiple tasks, which in this case are in an array, and then not fail on the first exception that might be thrown when you await all these tasks, but rather return and actually throw the aggregate exception that is returned by all of them when they all finish. This is a very common method that I've seen in many code bases, but it has this catch. This should never, ever be null if you reach this state. C# should not be able to get in a situation where this aggregate exception parameter is null. And in this case, if it is null, as you can see here, I'm throwing a new exception that says this isn't possible. And to be 100% sure that this isn't possible, I've actually in my alerting system set up an alert that says that if you see an exception with this text, then throw an alert and warn me, because I thought that this state isn't actually possible and somehow it was, and I want to investigate how it happened. So there's a clear need in some use cases where you might have an exception that you thought is unreachable or should not be able to be thrown. And this is where the brand new .NET 7 unreachable exception comes in. So now if we have state, and I'm going to go ahead and comment this out actually and go back to the old version, if we have state that we thought it's impossible to be reached, you can actually go ahead and throw a new unreachable exception. And if we go into documentation, you can see that it says exception thrown when program executes an instruction that was thought to be unreachable. Very clear. And you can see two overloads. One that accepts just text, so the message, and you can say that what the hell happened here, but better. Or you can have a message and the inner exception. So you can actually pass an exception and have this be a parent exception. And the benefit of this is that then in my alerting system, I can actually only listen for unreachable exceptions and be able to alert on any unreachable exception that is thrown and still maintain the inner exception that is being captured and carried over into my logs. So in this case, I would actually pass a message and say, try to pause premium status of int, and then pass down the int value of the status, which in this case, if I actually run this, I will get this exception saying unreachable exception, try to pass premium status of int 5. And then I can go ahead and investigate the problem further. And it's the same thing I would do here. I would say throw new unreachable exception and say aggregate exception of all tasks was null. What the hell? But more professional. And then when this happens, I'm going to get alerted on that exception, go ahead, see what happened, and do further investigation. Now, before I leave you, I want to show you how Microsoft themselves are using this. So I'm going to go into the .NET org and I'm going to search for unreachable exception over here. And I'm going to go ahead and look into the repositories, and I can find 42 files that contain this. Now, obviously, some of them are the ones that actually define it, so it's here. But then you can see that things in system.drawing.imaging are using it for things that's supposed to be unreachable over here. If we scroll down, you can find it in things like the URL base64 encoding. And what's very interesting is that here is also coupled with debug.fail, which anything in the debug class will actually be removed when this is compiled into release mode. So it looks like they have a safeguard for when they're debugging, but they also have this throw new unreachable exception for something that should never be able to happen. And we can go on and on, and you can see how they're used in many places where they thought things should not happen, but they want to be warned about it. It makes so much sense for their telemetry and will make so much sense for your telemetry as well. I highly recommend you take a look and see how you can use it, if you can use it, and add it into your system instead of maybe just using the exception class or a homebrewed version that isn't standardized across the board. Well, that's all I had for you for this video. Thank you very much for watching. Special thanks to my Patreons for making videos possible. If you want to support me as well, you can find the link in the description down below. Leave a like if you like this video, subscribe more, click the like this and the bell as well, and I'll see you in the next video. Keep coding.